My practicum focused on mapping land cover changes resulting from conservation subdivision development. We did a case study of 17 conservation subdivisions in North Carolina. So why is this practicum needed? In the United States alone, we've seen the population increase by 98% between 1950 and 2010, with even higher increases worldwide. This has led to a lot of ex-urban sprawl, which in turn leads to a lot of land loss. This can also create habitat loss and fragmentation, which puts pressure on species which may already be endangered. Conservation subdivision development was created as a way to actually help mitigate the problems associated with ex-urban sprawl. It actually sprang up as an extension of cluster development, and it was popularized by Randall Arndt. It sets aside half of the land that developers purchase, and it actually focuses on making sure that land is ecologically important. It goes beyond cluster development in that it actually preserves that land. Additionally, both clustered and conservation development group the houses on small plats of land in order to reduce the amount of infrastructure that is needed and the amount of land that's taken up by residential dwellings. So we went forward with a couple of questions. How effective are conservation subdivisions at preserving ecological areas? How widespread is their use? And can we develop a method to more quickly identify land cover distribution rather than just digitizing it all? So first we had to actually find the conservation subdivisions. This required us to do systematic Google searches, which did not yield much results. We then went through and contacted county planning boards via email or phone call if necessary. Once we'd actually found those subdivisions, we had to test which method was most viable, our random point method or actually digitizing all the land cover. We looked at 2 different conservation subdivisions for this, and the random points covered either 2, 5, or 10% of the land cover. They were also tested with 10-foot or 20-foot buffers, and we also used a 20 by 20 fishnet method. For digitizing, we had to digitize and identify all of the land cover, and then finally analysis, which involves simple analysis on Excel as well as exporting the data to R to run some ANOVAs. So the results for our random point method. With the 2% cover, we did not see much in the way of accuracy, though it was quicker than digitizing. The 5% point cover took longer than digitizing and had lower accuracy as well. We also tried a 10% cover on one of the small subdivisions to see if that would help mitigate the large percent error that we were seeing. However, that still took longer than digitizing. And finally, a fishnet method was tried instead of random point distribution, and it did have the lowest percent error and was faster than digitizing. However, as you can see on the right, the percent error was still quite large on that. So none of the methods that we used were valid in our research because the error was too great. So our preliminary results for digitizing. As expected, all of the conservation subdivisions had a net gain of impermeable surfaces. However, we found that less land was lost to these impermeable surfaces than we actually thought would be. Only around 4% on average was lost to streets, and only about 8% on average was lost to residential dwellings being built. On average, the subdivisions only lost 11% of their forest cover, which again was much lower than expected. And we also saw, surprisingly, that lawns tended to be the greatest cause of land loss. Now, this varied widely based on the actual subdivision we were looking at. So sometimes we had conservation subdivisions where 46% of the land cover was lost due to lawns, and sometimes it was 1%. It really varied depending on the type of conservation subdivision we were looking at. So there is still future work that is needed for this project. The data that we have needs to be plugged into R so that we can run ANOVAs to test for the significance. Additionally, we're going to test the correlation between listing price and the amount of conserved land. This will involve factors such as number of bathrooms, garages, etc., to help mitigate other associations with listing price. and we will also be writing a report on the findings. And here are my references. Thank you.